Hello, everyone. Welcome to Patreon Foundation Group. Nice to have you guys here for this next session of SketchUp Kit Bash. So we'll be actually doing a sketch over today, and so let's get to it. All right. So today, this is actually a voice record over, and we'll be actually covering a couple basics here. So last time I believe we did a demo on kit bashing, and today what we're going to be doing is we'll be going over actually kind of sketching over our 3D model and finishing it off today in the proper manner. So let's see here. So yeah, so we have our model last time, and we have a couple different ways that we can actually save our model out. So we save our model out here, export 2D graphic, okay, in SketchUp, and so that's for the first file. The second file, we actually want to turn on our shadows and turn off our lines, so turn off our edges and profiles, and export as 2D graphic. And I'll write in shadow and I'll export that out as a JPEG. And last but not least is our shade. So it's our shaded version here. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to turn off the shadows on the ground, export 2D graphic as shade, as a JPEG. Actually, what we want to do here is turn off the shadow on the ground. Okay, if you go to the options, and what it'll do is it'll preserve the shadow on the body, but it won't reflect it on the ground because we already have the ground shadow. Okay, now we can actually export the file. This is much more accurate. It's going to give you our 1, 2, 3 sides on our object, and now you want to export that out as shadow. Okay. Export it out as shade. Let's export it out. All right. And last, what we want to do is we want to go into our sketchy lines here. So under our default settings, there's kind of several different layers that'll give you the sketchy type of effect, as if you've kind of drawn your 3D object by hand. So let's see which one's most appropriate. There's a lot of different default styles on here. And make sure to choose the appropriate one. Then what I'll do is I'll go back in, and don't forget to turn on profiles Sometimes certain profiles will not read with certain type of things. So there we go. But just bump up the profiles there. Okay. And sometimes if you mess around with turning on and off extensions, it's pretty great too. Let's save it out as sketchy lines, JPEG, onto our desktop. All right. And now let's minimize that. Let's get rid of this window. I think this window was just sitting here. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's go to Photoshop. This is where we'll be doing most of our work today. Okay, let's open up all 4 of the files that we've had and get all the layers together. Okay, place all the layers onto one file. Okay, so I'll just drag it over. Just making sure I have the right files here. I think I have the right ones. Okay. So I'll turn off the saturation on my color file. So the shortcut is Command U on the Mac, and just take off the saturation. Now it makes it a grayscale. And then finally, let's put our other sketch in there. Okay. So you guys will see we'll be kind of organizing our files. Let's first save our file. I always try to make a good habit of saving because files are always crashing and programs are always crashing, so let's just be safe here. Okay, so I put my 2 sketch files on top, my shade file on third, and my shadow file on the bottom. Okay, and I like to actually name my files and organize your files, especially when you have a lot of files going on. So shadow, shade, sketch. All right, let's continue on here. So we've named our file. Okay, and let's kind of erase and clean away our sketch in the appropriate areas. Okay, sometimes like SketchUp, since it is kind of a loose 3D program, it'll kind of give you these unwanted lines. So I just like to clean up my files, go in there. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be erasing certain sections of our sketches. So we have our sketchy line, okay, from the file that we exported, and we have our okay, and we have our shade, so it's underneath. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to balance our computer generated lines with our sketchy lines. So we're going to kind of erase away at certain sections of our lines to kind of give it a sense of accuracy, but we're also going to clean up some of our sketchy lines and kind of balance between our kind of more tighter lines, but we don't want the super tight lines because they kind of look like it just came straight out of the computer. Okay. So something that looks like you kind of sketched it, but it looks clean enough. All right. So let's close out SketchUp here. It's taking up some bandwidth here. All right. Okay, so let's go gather some images. So I'm going to gather some images that I want to kind of put a little bit more character into my tank sketch. Maybe something with soft goods, something with some fabric. Always tends to kind of soften up your object. Okay. So maybe something in the back, and let's search keyword tanks. That looks pretty good here. That's perfect. Exactly what I want. I could just take that area from the rear tank and just cut it out and paste it into Photoshop. That's great. Let's look for a couple more objects here. All right. It's very important to kind of find the right things to kind of populate your drawing and kind of give the right type of character. You are kind of dress setting your object, so you don't want to overdo it or do anything too ridiculous, but you know, thinking about all the appropriate kind of components of your design. I don't think this was it. Now I like to sometimes pull out a sketch reference. I like the light and dark usage in this sketch. So I just keep it as a note and just put it in your file just so you can look at it. Okay. And let's look for a couple more images. Just because, you know, maybe it'll be nice to have just a little bit more versatility in your design. Big dog drone. Maybe this can help. Maybe not. Sometimes I like to look at different type of objects that might inspire my designs, because our tank sketch, our tank build, 3D build is very much kind of like the new government drones. Maybe getting some inspiration. Those drone dogs also, those big dog drones also have like backpacks hooked onto it, so we'll kind of do the same here. Army vehicles. Okay, looks like there's some netting that could be interesting, but that might be kind of a hassle to draw. It's a lot of geometry there. Okay. And sometimes it takes a while to find the right type of objects to actually populate your sketch here. So, oh, my scratch. Okay, there we go. That's a great image there. Nothing I can use here. Maybe some type of gun or something that we can actually put in towards the rear. There's a lot of great details there. Maybe that soft shell towards where the cannon is what we'll do. Kind of add this sort of geometry towards the rear of the vehicle. It's essentially this type of feel of the sketch feel. Okay, we'll have this here as reference just to look at. I like to just keep reference to look at the type of drawing that it is. Maybe this gun can work, maybe not, we'll see. Let's put it in place just in case. Maybe we can grab another object from this. Maybe that fabric right there, maybe it's a blanket of sorts. Let's create another layer. Let's drop it into place. And it really gives it a sense of naturalness when you do the sketch over. And add these sketchy lines to your 3D object. Otherwise it looks very 3D. So let's cut out this rear portion of this tank here. It looks like a bunch of storage bags. Okay, scale it into place. Maybe take that guy out. And looks like sometimes going back and forth and finding the right object is key. So let's use this gun piece here. It looks like a mounted machine gun. So looks much better there. And then we have that front portion of this tank, this type of fabric. Looks like it'll be nice to use this piece as well. And scale it into place. Now it doesn't need to be perfect, but just get it as close as possible, and we'll be sketching over it anyhow. Okay. Scale everything a little bit more accurately into place. All right. Kind kind of jumped the gun there, but we'll review really quickly right again. So what I did was I turned down the opacity and sketched over it. So we'll quickly sketch over it again. So let's get to it here. So what I did was I flattened the layers and did a quick line sketch over it. Okay. That's how it looks right there. Okay, now let's balance out all the other layers. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start kind of erasing away at the sketchy layer. I like to use a big soft brush at lower opacity at about 30%, 30 to 20% opacity on my eraser. And I'll just slowly kind of just erase around. Looks like I missed an area here. Make sure you don't miss. Fix this really quick. And make sure to fix up some of these mistakes. I always tend to do that and go back, fix it. It only takes 2 seconds, but it makes a world of a difference. All right, and let's continue to erase away on our sketchy lines. Our sketchy lines are a little bit heavier, so just kind of tend to erase away a little bit at it, pick and choose. Right, because it's a little heavier towards the rear, I'm just erasing away where areas where the line is just way too heavy. Right, you want to kind of balance it out and have a nice crisp look to your sketch. And I like using the brush on a pretty large scale. If you know, it's really just about the impression and the read, so, you know, try to use a larger brush. Go back in there. Erase out. It's getting much more balanced. It still feels sketchy right around the front leg, and it tightens up towards the rear, but it's a good balance. The line looks a little thin, so I'm going to double up on our sketches up top. So it looks like it's kind of, it looks like it's a part of our object up top. Okay, it's balanced a little better. Let's reorganize our files. Okay, now for our shadows. Okay. So let's go in there. What I did was I locked a layer into our sketch up top, and I'm just going to add the same type of shadow that we have, same color, same tone of gray, that is. We're going to add it to the top. Add it in multiply layer. Okay. Let's get our layer organization correct here. All right. There we go. And add in a cast shadow. And I like to go in there with the hard brush and make it similar to the type of shadow that we have on our object. So our object has some harder shadows. Let's clean up here really quickly. Alright, add that cast shadow in there. So now it looks like it's really just sitting on the side of our object now. Okay. And I don't try to be too tight. I mean, it is a kind of a hand-drawn, sketched object, so I'm not too meticulous with this type of work. It's really just about impressions. So knowing when to be accurate, but also what's really important is knowing when to not be accurate, really. Put the shadow on multiply. Okay, let's take a quick look. Kind of zoom out for a second. Okay, it's looking pretty good so far. Okay, looks like we have certain areas that are not finished. So let's go in there and add in some finishing touches on our lines, because SketchUp doesn't always kind of finish out everything. So just a little bit, not too much. It doesn't need to be perfect. Also like to add in some loose, sketchy lines to give it that really sketch feel. So let's add in some details here. Okay, finish up some of the lines on your object. Be really kind of loose. Give it some scratches. That hand touch feel. Okay. Let's look around. Some more scratches. It's basically more kind of dynamic sketching, hatching a little bit added on top of our design. It's really going to give it that extra layer of believability. I'm sorry. And yeah, especially when you're presenting this in your portfolio or like to a client, you know, just giving it that extra bit of I guess that looseness and that touch to your 3D, it makes it really look just like a sketch. Okay. All right, it's really starting to get that feel already. Let's do it the opposite way. Go. I also like to add in just some extra kind of objects. I'm kind of balancing out the rear. I think it'd look a little bit interesting. Kind of looks empty on top. Okay, add in some more details, some patchwork, buttons. Okay, so we started with the base and now we're just going back in there with some details. Some part lines. Okay, let's save it. Periodically save, don't forget. All right. Looks pretty good here. Let's take an overall look again. All right, looks pretty hand sketched, like a really interesting balance between 3D and hand sketch. Let's kind of lower our canvas here just a little bit. I think it's a little too high. Kind of balance everything out towards the end, and this stuff is really important as well compositionally. If you don't make the right adjustments, it really just makes it really confusing. So just take the extra steps to compose your shots. Right. Okay, so let's use our shaded levels and let's use levels, Command L, and make it a little lighter. Okay, so we have a little bit of value on our object. Okay. Let's go in there. Let's kind of even out all the other objects in there as well. Okay. So it's kind of cell shaded. Alright, so this was the sketch that we were going to try to mimic, just the darker portions. So let's go to levels. Okay, create a levels layer and adjust your darkness. So I'm going to make it nice and dark, my darkest of darks. Okay, that's going to be as dark as it gets. And then paint bucket 100% opacity of black onto this layer, and it's going to go away. And then we're going to be painting in white, so it's going to show us that dark layer in there, but it's still going to preserve our lines. Okay, so selectively go in there, start painting those areas. So this isn't a really full-on paint, but it is more of a, it's really just a shadow pass, just to show more information. Alright. And then adding shadow in certain areas. Really trying to get that sketchy feel. And the darkest of dark areas, you don't want too much dark, but just the right balance of dark will really help the object just read. Check around, see if there needs to be any other areas that needs to be darkened. I try not to overdo this, but just in the right areas, you know, it just adds just that extra bit of punch. Just a little bit, you know, just going around and just really looking at what areas need to be darkened up. Not everything needs to be darkened up, but it's almost kind of like a decision that I'm making as an illustration, and you know, just to balance out the black and white and the value. Oop, sorry about that. Let's turn that off. Okay. Let's mask around the bottom portion here. Just darken that up just a little bit. Okay, that's definitely separating the bottom to the top. Let's do another levels pass up on top. So now we're gonna do our brightest of bright. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just drag it and make it as bright as you would like. 100% black opacity, and we're gonna do actually the highlight pass, just something very, very basic. Paint in white, just a little bit, very subtle. All right. Yeah. See, I'm just hitting the tops of my object just to give it a nice little read. You know, it's not really that much brighter, but it's just going to give a little bit of dimensionality to a couple things. I want the light to be hitting towards the rear of my vehicle and my top side just to be a little brighter because it's kind of blending in with my number two side. Okay. Not too much, just read everything out. Maybe a little bit of a highlight right there, right on the edge. And again, this is just a sketch, so you know you don't want to really overdo it too much. Just enough so it looks dynamic and not boring. Let's check on all our layers. Let's make sure our cast shadow is accurate. Okay. Let's take a look again. It's looking much better. Let's add a little highlight to our cannon. Looking pretty good. Let's get rid of our sketch, delete that guy. Let's crop our picture so it looks appropriate. Alright, now let's actually look at our shadow. Let's duplicate our shadow. We're going to crop out the bottom area on one of the layers, and let's go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to just blur that bottom area. Not too much. Just enough so it looks like a real shadow, because shadows are not always perfectly sharp. Okay, and then turn on our other shadow, put it on multiply. So what you're going to see is you're going to see two shadows. The one that you put on blur, let's add in just a little bit of motion blur because it is at an angle. Okay, what we're going to do is now we're going to erase on the hard shadow layer. Let's go back here, that layer. Okay, let's clean up our shadow. Just a little bit. Let's go to our hard shadow and go with a soft eraser. Okay, we're going to kind of erase away certain portions. Now it looks like the shadow is running into our legs, so let's quickly crop our legs really quickly. It's really quick, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Again, it is supposed to be like a loose sketch. I think for industry, I mean, not too many people actually do really tight sketches these days, unless the sketch is for like a marketing poster of sorts. But for concept, it can be a little looser. Okay, so we have that bottom portion cropped out. Now we can erase on our shadow with a soft brush at maybe 50% opacity, and voila. We can really get that soft, nice blurred edge, okay, without it being like distracting. Okay, so we're getting a nice edge there. All right. Now we want to put in a nice shadow occlusion pass. So if you look at shadows where it's actually touching closest to the ground, it's just a little bit darker, but it's still really soft. So I'm just going to paint that in there. So just so it looks a little bit more realistic. It's a nice little touch there. It's not too much work, just a little bit. Erase out some of the shadows, it's totally fine. And okay, so that's one of our layers, and that's the other layer. Okay, for our shadow pass, one is on the body, one is not. Cleaning up, just a little bit of cleanup work. Okay, let's take a quick look here. Everything looks fairly balanced. Okay, and okay, so we have different layers there that we've worked on. So we've had that shade layer. So what we worked on was we have a couple different base layers that really kind of help us throughout our sketch and design process. If it were just up to me, just doing this freehand, it would take me a really long time, and especially to get this accuracy. So hopefully, you know, this time around, what we did was we got our session 1 where we did our kit bashing in SketchUp, and then we kind of gave it a nice organic feel because it feels a little too computerized. That we kind of sketched over it and kind of balanced it out a little bit. It's just much nicer to see something like this in the portfolio versus just like a pure 3D model. So really great, kind of just for basics, and you don't have to worry about too much about perspective, but it's more about concept. Really think about lighting and what type of objects. And as you guys can see, I really didn't go too heavy on the details. Just try it out really lightly, and just want to say thank you very much, and thank you for your support on Patreon Foundation, and give this a try. So the homework assignment is try a loose sketch over on one 3D bash, on top of one 3D bash, and sketch over it and turn it in, and I shall see you next month. Thank you so much, and keep it going.